Howdy, welcome to my Runcast. I'm running home a different way today, which has been very thrilling because I saw different dogs. I got to pet different dogs. I think there's a couple of puppies up here I'm about to pass, and you can hear this horrible music, maybe. I'm gonna pass by this, it's called Water Space. It's this big, ridiculous, built for tourists. I thought, Kevin and I drove past it a bunch of times because we used to come this way to the gym. And we were like, oh, how exciting. This looks like they're building a water park. It's not. It's basically just a 2-hour songkran for tourists in the evenings every day. So, oh, here are the babies. Look at the babies. You see them? Oh, ferocious. Impressive. Very impressive. Yeah. I'll stay over here. Uh-huh. So, I've been listening to this podcast from NPR as I'm running, which is very interesting. But I also think about these things all the time, and I don't know. I'm gonna go off. I'm gonna talk about it. I am gonna turn the comments off on this Runcast. So, if you have agreement and you're happy that this is being talked about and that kind of thing, I apologize that the comments are turned off. I know there are people out there who will be happy to hear this and listen to this and see this. If you're someone who wants to lay down a comment that is just inflammatory and toxic and being an asshole, pretending like there are people who don't deserve to exist comfortably in the world, that's the reason comments are turned off. Is because my platforms are, it's important to me to be a safe space for people who are vulnerable. So I'm gonna get into it. There was this big news story that hit because there are these two boxers, Olympic boxers, fighting in the women's division who did not get cleared for the World Games, but then people are very upset that they've been cleared for Paris because they weren't cleared for the World Games. The article I read was really bad. It was really hard to understand and not informative. I think it's written by AI or something, but what I think it meant, based on what I understood about it, is that the IBA, which was ruling the World Games, does not allow women who have a Y chromosome to compete in the women's division, whereas Paris Olympics do allow this. So basically, because Paris allows the Y chromosome thing to exist, it comes down to a testosterone threshold. So they test women athletes, and only women athletes, to make sure that their testosterone does not go past a certain level in order to be able to compete with other women in the women's divisions of a binary fucking system. There's only male and female sport divisions. So you're either male or female, and they're only testing women to be able to compete within the women's sports based on this testosterone threshold. Highly scientific, I'm sure. And so people are really upset about this having come out, that they're not upset about it coming out, they're upset about it, and it has come out that there are these two women boxing against women who these people who are upset about it think are not women, because I guess maybe they have a Y chromosome, I'm not sure, because it doesn't actually say. They're just talking about this testosterone threshold. And I've been getting pissed off about it because it made it into the news, so people are talking about it, very ignorant people are talking about it. And when I got to the gym today, Farang guy, who I don't talk to, had apparently been talking to Tapia before I got there about how a Katoi was fighting in the women's division, which this is the very, very common, the most common word used for trans people in Thailand. It's not a polite word. It's not terrible, it is used by Katoi also, but it's not a polite word, it's not a nice word, and it also is not correct for what is happening or what it means for these women who are competing in these games. So I'm gonna go off and talk about how pissed off I get at this totally not modern, this has been going on forever, policing of gender, specifically femininity. It comes down to misogyny. The fact that it's only trans women who people are concerned about competing. Nobody fucking cares about trans men competing, honestly. there is a trans man boxer, like professional boxer, and he's incredible. Like, he's had mastectomy. I don't know how much surgery he's had, and honestly, it doesn't fucking matter. But he competes against men, and he wins against men, and he's openly talking about being a trans man, and that this is like this incredible, meaningful thing in his career. Nobody fucking bats an eyelid. But with trans women, women in general, the only time people ever care about women's sport is to police femininity, and not even trans athletes, just even how you look as a woman in your own sport. If you're kind of tomboyish, if you're not attractive, if you're flat-chested, any of these things will get you fucking ragged on being a woman in women's athletics, and it drives me crazy. So not these two women who have made the news, but yet another trans man from the Philippines is fighting in the women's division. And I'm going to say he because that is how he identifies. But he has a female body and he has never taken any kind of hormones. And so he's saying, I don't think that there's any problem with me competing in the women's division because I'm trans in my heart, and physically has not had any kind of adjustment. This is very similar to Nong Rose, who's a trans woman in Thailand. She has taken no hormones, she's had no surgeries, she does nothing. She just is a trans woman. And this is a thing that exists. She competes against men who, by all means, are cis, identify as men, male-bodied, all this kinds of thing. In Thailand, the rule is, it is that like assigned male at birth, assigned female at birth kind of thing. That's who you're going to be fighting against. So it doesn't matter whether you have surgeries, take hormones, any of those things. If you were assigned male at birth, you will be competing against men in Thailand legally, and vice versa. This is not legally or socially or whatever any kind of genetic or biological test that determines whether you are male or female. This is obviously just an anatomical assignment of whether you're male or female in Thailand to assign who you're going to fight against. And honestly, this is kind of how people think about this across the globe, is that anatomically you should be here or you should be there, because we don't even understand genetics or biology well enough to have a binary sex anymore. Like, it used to be very clear because we didn't really know anything, and now we know we don't know anything, and so it's less clear. In this podcast, they're talking about how you learn in biology that any embryo, like any egg that is fertilized that's XX, that's going to turn into a girl, and anything that's XY, that's going to grow into a boy. We now know that that is not always the case, and there are all kinds of combinations that take place. There are XY chromosomes that turn into people who completely look and identify as women. There are XX chromosomes that grow into people who completely look and identify as men. They would never know that they're XX unless you do this kind of test. And then there are people who are XX or XY or any of these things who they're like, this is not right, this doesn't feel right, my body and who I am don't really match. There's all kinds of variations that happen. There are people who look and feel and present and all these things completely as a woman, and they have undescended testicles inside their bodies that are creating testosterone. And so a woman will be creating a lot of testosterone naturally. That's just what her body does. And that testosterone will do what testosterone does in any body. Women and men, male and female, all these things all create testosterone. There are actually like male men who don't create testosterone. And so they have to take it as a medicine because this is correcting the body. And then there are people who take it to correct the body because their body doesn't match who they feel themselves to be. So this trans man fighting in boxing in the Olympics, who is allowed to do this because anatomically female, so this is fine, you can fight against women, haven't taken any testosterone hormones, that's fine, you can fight against women. I have fought against trans men like this in Thailand. Some of my opponents are trans men. Thailand is not doing genetic testing, they're not doing biological testing, which means that these are legally women in Thailand, regardless of how they feel. And so that's what I'm talking about. But these are trans men. They may or may not use male personal pronouns. Sometimes they continue to use feminine personal pronouns because socially they don't want to fucking deal with it, which is totally understandable. And I don't know, like, I don't know my opponents super well before fighting them usually. Sometimes there are people who I fought who then I fight many times again later, and I get to know them really, really well. So there are people who I fought many times who I know quite well, who I follow them in their careers now and how their personalities have come out and the more they talk about things and present things, and I'm like, this is a trans man. This is totally, I would call this person he. I would use the correct pronouns for this person. And they're not, to my knowledge, doing any kind of surgeries. I don't think anyone has done any kind of like hormone work, anything like that. But that's not my fucking business. Like, that doesn't matter. And I can understand why taking hormones and this kind of thing becomes complicated because testosterone has an effect on bodies that can lead to advantages. And so this can be seen as a performance enhancing hormone. It's not a drug. So I can see how people would think about this as like, this is something that needs to be looked at. This is something that needs to be monitored, but they're not checking men. They're only checking women. They're only checking people who are doing really well as women. In this podcast, they were talking about how there are so many variations to biological sex. There's actually no such thing as biological sex. In like how genetics work, there's so many variation that they say that about 1% of the population has some kind of variation that's not the like XX equals boy, XY equals girl kind of thing. This is actually a huge number. And to put this a little bit into perspective, that happens to be the same percentage of the population that has celiac disease, that can't digest gluten to a point where some people don't have any symptoms of it, and some people have really horrible symptoms of it. And so some people will simply stop eating gluten and be fine. Some people will continue to eat gluten and kind of not be fine, and this kind of thing. But it's the same number of people in the population, and there is this huge marketing thing to create gluten-free products for those people to be more comfortable, which is an incredibly different fucking response to a similar number of the population who we're expecting to take drugs in order to fit in to this very, very narrow understanding we have about sex definitions and gender, instead of, maybe you can have this kind of thing that doesn't determine, or that doesn't make you feel terrible. Here's something that you can take that'll make you more comfortable. Here's something that'll make you not feel so out of place. You can have this kind of muffin instead of that kind of muffin. And I understand this is kind of a weird example because celiac disease is universally seen as like an impingement. It's not something that people have, and the drugs to fix it are not something that's going to give you some kind of advantage in a sport. But in terms of the number of people who have it, who are given accommodation for it, or at least given options in accommodation for it, and the same number of people are completely vilified for, or told that they're not right, or you need to correct this, or you need to take drugs in order to not be like this, is absolutely insane. And then, if you take into account not only that it's 1% of the population, which again, this is a larger number than people make it out to be, but a much, much smaller number than people act like it is, the number of those people, of that 1% that are going to end up in sports, is really low. Like, the way people are acting like trans people are doing these crazy things and taking advantage and cheating, all this stuff, this is an incredibly, incredibly small number of people, and it's crazy that people make this big of a deal about it. And it's the thing that makes me so mad about it, the thing that makes me so instantly irritated when people comment very disparagingly, very rudely, very ignorantly about this, because they're trying to protect women in sports. People don't fucking care about women's sports at all whatsoever until it comes to trans women. And then it's this kind of like, oh, women are so inferior. Having any kind of maleness to you is so superior. It's just fucking misogyny warmed over. And it's misogyny. Don't run in front of things. It's misogyny that women totally fucking get on board with, where they're like, yes, I'm totally inferior, and anyone who has like this iota more of testosterone is cheating and blah, blah, blah. And it is ignorance that makes people feel this way for the most part. One, because none of us are fucking scientists. We just, like, do with what we kind of understand about things. But two, the way that trans people have been depicted in media is what makes you know what a trans person is or think about what a trans person is. I think now, because there's more visibility, people are more out in their transness and they're kind of gaining a little bit more visibility, which is fucking wonderful. There's more people who actually know a trans person now than there ever have been before. But it's still a little bit like racism, where you're like saying all these horrible things about black people, but then like Gary from The Office is different kind of thing. It's kind of like that. People who like... Sorry, I have to wait for these cars to go. These puppies are gonna run in front of the cars. Like that. So if you look at how trans people, and this, again, this is not even trans people, if you look at what people are thinking of when they think of a trans person, because either they think they don't exist because they think they're like this, or they think that there's some kind of nefarious thing, like people who think that trans athletes are doing it to win, that they're actually doing amazingly crazy things to their bodies and transitioning and living as a woman in this fucking misogynistic, patriarchal world in order to win at high school track. I don't fucking know. But you look at what people are probably thinking of, and you have these examples which are like Mrs. Doubtfire or Tootsie or Some Like It Hot or Ladybugs. What was that one? There were like two men who dressed as women so that they could live in an apartment or something. I don't know. All of these examples, all of those examples are men dressing as women in order to cheat in some way, in order to get something that they're not really supposed to have. And so Mrs. Doubtfire wants to see his kids, so he dresses as a woman so he can see his kids, and hilarity ensues because his breasts catch on fire, because he forgets to use his high voice, because his teeth fall out, because at the end of the day he goes home, he takes his wig off, he becomes a man, and he has to put pie in his face in order to hide the fact that he's a man at home. Tootsie, fucking funny movie. I love Dustin Hoffman. There are lines from that movie that I quote because I think they're very funny. Like, you want to see what a bad girl looks like? Here, look at yourself. To a baby. I say this to my pets all the time. But this is someone who's an actor who, because of affirmative action, he can't get a job. Oh, poor white men can't get the job because they want to hire women for this. So he dresses as a woman in order to take a job that is intended for women for this kind of affirmative action thing. So during the day, he has to go be a woman. He actually kind of falls in love with one of the actresses, and so it creates this problem because, oh, I can't be a woman, she's gonna think I'm a lesbian, blah, blah, blah. And when he goes home, he's got his deep Dustin Hoffman voice, he takes off his nylons, he takes off his wig, he's kind of ugly when he's in the in-between stage kind of thing. And Some Like It Hot, they're trying to like get a job as musicians, again, trying to take jobs as musicians because this is a female-only band, so they're like, we'll just stick ourselves in there. Ladybugs, this is a boy playing on a girls' soccer team. All these examples are men dressing as women. These are transvestite. They're not even enjoying it. And at home, they take it off and they're boys again and like, oh no, I have a crush on this person who I'm dealing with as a woman, and fooling them, which is totally what people talk about, like trans women in bathrooms kind of thing, that they're actually secretly attracted to the other women in the bathroom. These are women. These are not fucking men in wigs kinds of things. So I see that this is what people think of because this is what they've been presented as, and this is what they think of as trans people. This is not what trans people are. Someone who is like putting the kind of more feminine donning, playing with gender a little bit more non-binary, testing things out, whatever the thing is. There may be people who are just kind of going through a phase a little bit and they're kind of like playing things out. They're seeing what feels good and what doesn't. We all do this in our youth. These are not the people who are taking hormones, getting approved by doctors, going to doctors, waiting years for this kind of approval, and then years of taking these hormones, possibly having surgeries. These are completely different levels of commitment. These are completely fucking not the same thing at all. And probably one of the most damaging examples that we have in media of a trans person is Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs. And this movie gets called out a lot as being so dangerous and so damaging to what people think of as trans people. Really, this is like a transvestite situation. It's quiet. They say this part quietly, but it is in the movie. Hannibal Lecter, when treating Miss Moffat, who's Buffalo Bill, did not approve the sex change surgery because he was not a true transsexual. So it's in there. It's actually in the movie saying this is not a true transsexual. So what we would now say is trans. It's in the movie, and people just like totally forget that part. But this is what I'm saying, is that all of these examples in media, these are not true trans people. And then you have, hi baby, little babies. And then you have examples of women doing this as men, right? And you have something like She's the Man. So this is the opposite of Ladybugs. This is Amanda Bynes, doesn't have a soccer team, and so she pretends to be her twin brother and plays on his soccer team because she has some problem with her boyfriend, can't play. I don't know what the thing is. It's to have the opportunity to play soccer. Mulan dresses as a man in order to fucking go to war. What was the other one? One of the guys, I think that she dresses as a boy in order to like prove a point about patriarchy or something like this. Like women dressing as men in the like trans man media that we're given in the world. Boys Don't Cry, horrendous one, but that one's based on truth. These are all just kind of like, yeah, it makes sense that a woman would want to like be a man because they have more opportunities and like they can kind of get away from their limitations and blah, blah, blah. This is why nobody fucking bats an eyelid about trans men. They're not worried about trans men. They're only worried about trans women. Again, because of misogyny. Again, because they think that trans women are trying to pull one over on someone. They think that they go home and they just become men. They're not men. Like, they're not like, oh, I'm just gonna devote years of my life in psychology and like being shat on by the world in order to win a fucking high school track meet or a medal or something. This is not a thing that happens. And if people were using hormones and male to female transition to cheat, they'd be doing it. Like, you'd see this from the countries that cheat the most. You would see it happening, and you never see it happening. This is not a thing that happens. You would be seeing it from these very, very cheaty countries if this was a legitimate way to cheat and get medals. Fucking, I don't know. I saw a tweet that was like Lance Armstrong would have done it if it was something that people did, which, you know, you can pick on him, that's fine. But he's at least trying, I guess, to understand a little bit better. So yeah, that's me talking about how it makes me very, very mad that this outrage over people just trying to fucking live their lives. The reason trans athletes get into athletics is because they love that sport. It's because it feels good for the women will lift weights for exactly the same reason men lift weights. Power feels good to everyone. There's this whole fucking thing about Bev Francis being kind of the first female bodybuilder who really went for it. Like, she really went for a big build as opposed to the kind of like fit bikini build. And people completely freaked out about it. Like, you look like a man, blah, 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 this whole thing. And it's like, this feels good to a woman for exactly the same reasons it feels good to a man. We assign that feeling masculinity, but that's not masculinity. Masculinity doesn't belong to men. Testosterone does not belong to men. It's in all of us. It's in different degrees. I'm a woman. I'm a cis woman. I don't have any kind of like, I'm not sure, kind of whatever. I'm not super comfortable in my gender expression because I don't think that anyone is, honestly. It's very complicated to be a woman. But I don't do Muay Thai because I have some conflicting feelings about being a woman. But what I love about Muay Thai is its expression of masculinity. I just don't think that belongs to men. I don't think that that's out of reach of me because masculinity belongs to men. I think that that performance is just as fucking beautiful and amazing from a woman and for a woman, and reaching for those ideals or reaching for those expressions, they're the exact same things. So there are all kinds of things that people do in order to be who they truly are, to be comfortable, to be able to fucking get out of bed in the morning. And to think of that as cheating is crazy. And they can be performance enhancing without that being the intention of why you're doing it. So like, there was a fighter who broke his shin and he got titanium put in his shin. He didn't do that to be better at Muay Thai or to hit people with an iron rod or titanium rod in his shin. He did that so he could fucking walk again. So you can't call that cheating. I, for a while, was taking antidepressants to be able to fucking get through my day and not want to kill myself all the time. That's performance enhancing, honestly. It didn't make me faster. It didn't make me stronger. It didn't on any kind of like metric of like thing that makes me like all of a sudden superhuman, but it got me out of bed. It got me not, unable to move anymore kind of thing. That's performance enhancing. There are arguments to be made that writers like Hunter S. Thompson taking all kinds of psychedelics and stuff like this to write the way that he did, honestly because it's his personality, but like Burroughs dropped a lot of acid probably. You have someone like oh man, I'm dropping names here now, but you have writers who take drugs, you have writers who drink a lot, you have writers who take caffeine. Like, is that performance enhancing? Should you make it so that students who are cramming for an exam can't use caffeine? Because technically that's performance enhancing, to be able to stay up and, study more kind of thing. Like they're doing it so they can study, and the studying is what makes them able to take the test. People who are trans, who are trying to make their bodies inhabitable for themselves, or who are taking hormones in order to feel more who they are, or to not feel so trapped in the wrong space of what your body is, they're not doing that to be better at sports. Like, that's not why they're doing that. And so there are complications that you have to consider in terms of like making things fair for everyone, but it's not a protecting real women situation. It's a, hey, things have become more complicated because we have more knowledge now. So let's try to fucking find a way to make this manageable. And because it's such a small percent of the population, the answer is not you have trans classes. As women in Muay Thai gyms, we are always underrepresented in Muay Thai gyms. I can tell you that a lot of the women listening to this right now will identify with this. When you're in a gym and there aren't very many other women, and then it's time for sparring or clinching or something like this, they automatically pair you with either just the other woman, regardless of you being at completely different levels or completely different sizes, but you're just women, so you go together, or they pair you with a 13-year-old boy who, again, this is regardless of your capacity as a woman, your skill as a woman, how good you are. They put you with the kid because woman, kid, woman. It has fucking nothing to do with pairing you for your actual skills and abilities. This is basically what would happen if you tried to make trans-only classes, because there just simply aren't enough right now for that to be fair in any way. You're not going to find two people who are actually matching in their skills, experience, size, weight, any of those things. So basically we've come to a point in time where it has become very evident that our binary system of like male and female, weight, size, these kinds of things, they're approximations of making things fair, and some of them are much better approximations than others. Yeah. So, 2, be kind and understand that we're in like a phase of discovery. We're in the discovery phase. And when we learn more, when we know more, we'll be able to do better. But right now we fucking don't know very much. We know more than we used to, so we can do better now. But doing better is not excluding people. Like, doing better is not shitting on people for being different. And these people that we are talking about that are in the news, that get an asterisk next to their name anytime they're mentioned because of their anatomy. Like, I don't want fucking, as a cis woman, you are reminded of your body and being a woman all the time in a way that men aren't in sport. And in a culture, I live in a culture where there's menstrual taboos. You're reminded of your anatomy and your vagina all the fucking time in a way that's incredibly uncomfortable. This should not be how we like asterisk people. This should not be a way that we're like, yeah, that athlete accepts these things. Like these women who are fighting in boxing in the Olympics right now, who like, people are outraged that they weren't allowed by the IBA, but they are allowed by Paris, different governing bodies, and let them fucking fight rather than arguing about whether or not their bodies are allowed to exist in this space because it's not the same as what we assume the other women in these categories are. We're not doing genetic testing on people in order to be here. We're just like making approximations, and they decided on the testosterone thing as like a, I guess this is scientifically sound enough. And again, it's not even fairly applied to everybody. So again, no, I just get mad. Just no. But yeah. Now I'm ranting on the street, and I'm gonna stop doing that.